The Gospel of Mark, that our passage this morning was read from, begins like this, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Well, it immediately moves to Jesus' baptism. And as he comes out of the water, Jesus alone hears from this voice from heaven, "You are my child, you are my son, my beloved. With you I am well pleased." And immediately that same Spirit drives Jesus into the wilderness to figure out what that might mean. And he's there a long time. And as he comes out, he moves through the countryside, essentially saying to those with whom he meets, "You are God's beloved. With you I am well pleased. And you, and you, and you." This one drop that begins with just his own hearing, then starts to ripple out, much like a drop in a pond, rippling out, sending that love further and further out. Now, Jesus is Jewish, and he's speaking to the Jewish community. But he's not on the center of the inside, he's on the edge of the inside. He is always crossing boundaries, going between places, moving across boundaries and back. He lives on the edge of the inside. And you know the difference because the insiders are the people who believe that the status quo holds everything, that that is the way things must be. And if you're an outsider, you're outside the system altogether. You have a hard time appreciating anything. You just want to blow it all up. But the person on the edge of the inside can see both sides, can move back and forth, as Jesus did in and out of communities. He was spending some time in the Decapolis, which is Jewish and Greek, but mostly Gentile, mostly not Jewish. But he, at that point, is speaking to Jewish communities. He's healing people. He's restoring them to community. He's breaking boundaries, but breaking boundaries in service of this rippling out of love. When someone comes to him and said, "Your mother and your sisters are here," as if to say, like, "We gotta rein you in, dude." He's like, "These are my brothers. These are my sisters." This radical movement of love is what matters. But in this moment, in this instance, Jesus moves beyond even the edge of the circle. Up till now, he's stayed in a particular sort of area, and at this moment, he's moved to Tyre, and Tyre is further out. It's clearly Gentile territory, no question. And he's there, apparently, to recover. He doesn't want anyone to know that he's there. He's kind of under the down low. He's like just hanging. But that ripple of love has already preceded him. And so that can't be hidden. It can't be submerged. It can't be unseen. This woman, clearly an outsider's outsider, a woman, a Gentile, someone who's Syrophoenician, there's no mistaking it. This is someone outside. Comes, kneels at his feet, and begs him for that love to touch her daughter who is ill. Now, this is not one of Jesus' better days. This is a day where I think he had bad hair day, or he had no coffee, or woke up cranky or something, because he's not his gentle self in this encounter. But I want to take a moment and recognize something. There are only two of them in this meeting, Jesus and the woman. So if Jesus is the one telling the story, think about it this way. He's outside that edge, and this woman comes and challenges where the edge of love is. And he's not disagreeing that love will get there. He's just saying when. But she, standing in the tradition of Abraham and Moses, is well willing to challenge, is that really where love's limit is? Are you sure that love can't go beyond that limit even now? And he, honoring that, recognizing that, he is transformed. He expands the boundary, recognizing that love isn't limited, even by that which he thinks in that moment. Jesus grows. Now, that may feel uncomfortable to us. We want God to know everything all the time, and yet Jesus is human, and we know that we have limits. We don't see it all. It's helpful to recognize that Jesus grew in this moment, opening up for us the possibility that we too. Think also about the fact that he immediately moves back into this Decapolis, this region where there are Gentiles and Jews living side by side. And the very first person he finds to heal is someone whose ears are stopped and whose tongue is stuck. That is no accident. Jesus is demonstrating for his disciples, and I suspect when he recounted this story, if we hear about it through him, that he played up how ugly that understanding of limit really was, because he saw that it was to move beyond, that love moved beyond. And so the first thing he does is to unstop the ears, is to loosen the tongue, to remind us that that's what we're about. That's love's work, restoring, healing, reconciling, embracing. It's possible that we get this story from her telling. And I wonder if, in fact, that encounter was somewhat colored by the fact that my guess is she's heard that all her life, that she's nothing, that she is worthless. And so whatever it is that he said, that's what she heard. But she also had tasted the power of love, the power that is stronger than anything that oppresses, that anything defines us as victim or outsider or not to be included, that love is more powerful, love is what transforms. She too was transformed in finding her voice. Her voice was unleashed as well. Love is bigger, she says. And indeed, it is. Her daughter is healed. What does this point of transformation look like in your life, in my life? Being able to see what's stopping up our ears and finding voice to the power of love in your life, in my life, in our world today. I want to share a story with you that I heard this summer from my friend Dennis. Dennis shared that he and his wife were visiting their brother and sister-in-law in their apartment. And the nice warm day and the regular doors opened, it was just the screen door, and the four of them were sitting and visiting, and they heard a kind of commotion out in the parking lot, but they didn't really think anything of it. And suddenly the door opened, and there was a young guy, maybe 18 years old, standing there with a gun, and walked right up to Dennis and put the pistol in Dennis's face. There was another guy standing at the doorway who never said a word, but this young guy, shaking like a leaf, said, "Give me your money." And so Dennis fumbled for his wallet and pulled out the few dollars that he had and threw that on the floor. The guy said everybody else should do the same, and they did. There wasn't a whole lot of cash there. So Dennis even said, here's my car keys. Take that. Eventually, the two left. They found through some fingerprints of something he picked up, they found him. And at his hearing, the five of them, the four that were in the apartment, and the guy who, while he was washing his car, had also been held up at gunpoint, arrived at the hearing, and they testified on the young man's behalf. They testified to allow the young man to be released. into the custody of his aunt, who had shown up in her dress whites. She was in the military. They knew, you see, that the eyes that they saw underneath the hoodie and above the scarf that he had in front, that he was terrified, and that what he was really doing was an initiation into a gang. And these people that he had held up knew something about that. They knew that if he was imprisoned, he would not just be scared, he'd become hardened. He'd become way worse and come back out entrenched in that life. But if they intervened on his behalf and could get him released, that there was a chance that love could be manifesting a different future for this young man. I was impressed. I was like, I don't know how many people would do that. Most people are after some retribution, which is what our justice system is all about. But he was embracing restoration, the hope that love can make a difference in all of our lives at every point. So I asked him how they knew to do that, or how they were moved to be able to hear and see differently and respond differently. And he said, well, I've been involved in prison ministry for quite some time. I bring the practice of centering prayer into the inmates. And I walk those halls and I see their eyes. And I see some that are hardened, so hardened by life's challenges and by hopelessness. And I see others that are terrified, absolutely bewildered and uncertain. And some I see that are searching, that are yearning for something more. He said, but it's also true that I had been in prison once. You see, at 19, I was an angry radical with hair down to here, and I was arrested for possession of drugs, and I was thrown in prison. I was in for a week, and I still don't know, he said, what enabled my release. Maybe because I was white, and my dad paid the fine, could afford it, and did, but I don't really know how I got off. But here, 30 years later, I have a sense of what restoration and love can be about in a life. That's what we're to be about, is restoration and healing and finding that love does not have edges or boundaries. It's always rippling out in front of us. I want to share some insights to glean from this morning using my hand and yours. I want to start with this. It's really good news. It's outstanding news that love is always out ahead of us. At the end of the Gospel of Mark, it doesn't say, that's the end of the good news. It says, go. Jesus is already ahead of you in Galilee. That's the good news. Love is always out ahead of us. No matter how broken we are, how hurt, and no matter how much pain or suffering or how much oppression others experience, love is already out there. And that's good news. The second is a little bit wagging a finger, because our minds like to play games. Our minds, our ego likes to put boundaries around love. Whether it's ourself and the ways that we've fallen short, or the ways that we can't receive love, or that others can't. That insider, outsider I talked about, they always see each other on the opposite side. They can't even hear what's good about each other. We tend to make boundaries, and then as the letter to James's letter says, we have preferences. So we like people who look like, they've got it together. We're drawn to things that are comfortable. But Jesus challenges those boundaries that we create, that we think are right, and says, think again, open up further. Love is beckoning you beyond where you are right now. And whenever that happens, it's bumpy. Transformation is always uncomfortable. Jesus' transformation in the wilderness was not easy, but it opened him to see where love was going. He withdrew frequently to pray, to try to open himself to that wisdom. And in this encounter with the woman, transformation came in the confrontation that he didn't feel good through, but he moved beyond. How are you and I experiencing the transformation that God offers through suffering, through times of pain, through times where we or others are oppressed? Those are points of transformation, and if we can get into relationship with those hard things in our lives and see that they're in fact love bringing us through them, not that love's causing them, but that love will use them in our lives if we're willing to take us beyond into a larger place. Ring finger is that we can always choose. We can choose to become hardened and oppress others out of our sense of hurt, or we can choose to embrace this way and continually open ourselves to this transforming love for ourselves and for others. It's a choice, and we are the ones who choose every day. And finally, the pinky is the practices. It's the things that we do, the concrete little things, big things, the way we vote, the way we interact with people who are like us and people who are different from us, the way we are part of healing in the world around us, and the way we intentionally embrace this way of life, which happens over again. It's not just a one-time thing. We get expanded in one way, and then we turn it around and we are again and again and again. We are people of the way, followers of Jesus. Jesus models in this uncomfortable gospel what that means for us and for our world. And that is indeed good news. May we continue to ripple out in love this day and always.